It was like a total myth that I was even a drummer.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During social distancing lockdown, we're releasing daily episodes. Today's episode was recorded before the outbreak of coronavirus. Today's guest is Rick Smith. Rick is best known as the drummer for Torche, a band he co-founded in 2005. My old band, Parts and Labor, shared some bills with Torche 12 years ago, and it was great to reconnect with Rick when the band was in LA last fall. Torche's excellent fifth album, Admission, was released last year. And now my conversation with Rick Smith.
First thing that went through my head this morning was kind of a panic about what time it was because we had to leave to get here early. The amoeba thing we had to come here for, we had to load in at noon, and we were in Tucson. So we woke up at 4, and I just remember thinking, like, can I drive? That's really what it was. I woke up and was like, can I do this today? Because I do a lot of the driving. I prefer it, but...
you like to be in control?
Kind of. It's mostly...
It's less boring than being a passenger?
Well, I do like to listen to music, you know, and I get car sick if I'm in the back. That's really part of it. I get car sick if I'm in the back seat. So if I'm not driving, I like to be passenger. But I do like to have weed in the van also, and I don't like the guys speeding when I know I have some on me. So I'm like, if I'm driving, I drive 5 over or keep it chill.
Can you drive while you're high?
Totally, yeah.
You can?
Yeah, that's my favorite. Actually, that's kind of why I like doing it. I like getting kind of baked in the morning when I first wake up after I shower and stuff. And sometimes I have breakfast or whatever. And get baked and then drive long distance is nice. Because it's different than city driving. I mean, I think like getting stoned and driving around here would drive me nuts. Like in traffic, all the cars. But on tour, it's nice because get on the highway and then it's just like... cruising forever, you know, so you get to listen to music. It's kind of the most comfortable place to listen to music, I think.
What do you listen to?
Oh man, everything. So usually this trip has been me and our tour manager Daniel sitting up front. He's like my co-pilot. He's been hanging out with me most of the drives. Yesterday we played each other a bunch of jazz back and forth. He was playing me a bunch of like free jazz and stuff like throughout the day, and then we made a playlist of like death metal demo tape stuff. We did a dub reggae, like little back and forth thing as well. Kind of listen to a little bit of everything in the band. I feel like we'll like just kind of it'll start with conversation first, talking about like, hey, remember this, and someone will play something, and you kind of get into conversation about that, you know, and one thing leads to another, and before you know, you've got. You know, everyone's like, oh, yeah, well, play this next. Oh, yeah, play this next. And then before you know, like, we're all listening to this one style of music we're talking to. Everyone's, like, talking about songs. And this trip, we've listened to everything from, like, experimental noise and ambient music to, like, jazz or, like, even kind of, like, indie rock stuff, too, you know? Like, a little bit of everything. I think it depends. Like, I feel like John, when he drives, he likes to listen to, like, a lot of rock. John likes, you know, rhythm and stuff. I can get down with, like, it's funny, me being the drummer, I can get down with, like, stuff with no rhythm at all, like, just ambient, free form stuff. Like, I like that.
I just saw Sun last night.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy loud, right?
Yeah, but it didn't feel shrill. Like, it didn't hurt my ears. I could feel it in my body.
Yeah.
I didn't walk out there with my ears ringing because there's no cymbals.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not, they don't have, like, a super trebly sound.
Right.
You know, so it's not piercing. It was interesting. I'd never heard something that loud that didn't hurt my ears.
Yeah, I got to see them one time. It was like that experience is like overwhelmingly like body, like a physical kind of feeling. Yeah, they're pretty awesome to watch.
So take me back. Did you grow up in Florida?
Yeah, I did. Born and raised in Miami.
Really?
Yeah.
I've done 2 podcasts in Miami. One was with this great Cuban drummer named Ignacio Baroa, and then the other one was with Phil Collins.
Nice. Awesome.
So that was a couple years ago now. You'll be the 3rd Miami person. Well, I had the drummer from Miami Sound Machine, too. Once.
Oh, wow.
What was it like growing up there?
It's funny. I mean, it's probably like similar to growing up in most other big cities in a lot of ways. It's big and it's metropolitan, and there's like a lot like areas that are like super nice and like busy. Like I went to school on Miami Beach, but I didn't really ever live on Miami Beach. My mom worked on Miami Beach, so I was able to go to school close to where she worked, but I lived in like mainland Miami. So I felt like everything was traveling by car, kind of like similar to LA, like big cities where you need a car. I mean, I feel like there's places like New York, people get around on trains. Philly can be like that. Like there's definitely cities in the Northeast particularly. So it's kind of like that in a lot of ways where like, there's a lot of stuff. There's stuff going on, and as a kid growing up there, you start getting into things. There's a lot. You start to discover that there's a lot going on around you that you didn't know about. But the general vibe of the city, it's a dance music city. It's kind of a party place. It's kind of a paradise like getaway spot.
Did it feel like paradise when you were growing up?
I mean, so that's, I guess, like what I was ultimately going to get at was that it's hard to gauge what paradise is when you grow up in a place like that,
Yeah.
It really wasn't until I like started touring with bands that I kind of started feeling like where I lived was paradise when I come back, I needed like a taste of something else, like touring through the Midwest or like.
Which is where I grew up.
Yeah. Where were you from?
I'm from Milwaukee.
Milwaukee. Oh, yeah. I like Milwaukee, actually.
It's a good town.
Yeah, my first tattoo artist, actually, he's a good friend of mine. He just moved back there. He's originally from there, too. So I'm going to be seeing him on this trip.
What's his name?
Brady Buckman. Yeah.
It looks like you just got a new tattoo.
I did, actually, yeah. I got a Motorhead tattoo on my forearm.
Just kind of on a whim? Or had you been planning it?
I always told myself I'd get a Motorhead tattoo someday. Like, it was like something I was going to do because I obviously love Motorhead. But
who's your favorite Motorhead drummer?
Oh, man. The OG, Filthy Animal.
Filthy, yeah.
Yeah, man. He had the wild style, you know? I liked his like looseness, There's something kind of punk about his style playing.
Oh, for sure. It feels like punk drumming.
Yeah, totally. I kind of feel like, it gives off that vibe that like, we're kind of fucked up and partying. Like that's what they sound like. They sound like they're up to no good. Motorhead was like, I like that dirty vibe the most, I'd say. And he looked the coolest, and I think he looked awesome.
You did have a filthy look.
Oh yeah, big time.
You mentioned that your mom worked on Miami Beach. What did she do?
For a long time, she had a few jobs in the hospital, but her original job was she was a supervisor at an emergency room at a hospital there. So she was there working just a regular like 9 to 5 shift there. And she was there for years, and then she started working in an oncology center for the same hospital. So she was there. She's still there currently. So It's been a long time. She'll be retiring soon, though. So pretty stoked for her to be able to retire and chill out.
My mom worked in the ER when I was a kid as well.
Oh, really?
She still is an RN. All growing up, she had crazy stories from the ER, and then works in an urgent care clinic now. And I'm excited for her to be able to retire sometime soon, too.
Yeah.
They deserve it.
I know. It's crazy. It's crazy what your parents do to give you a nice life growing up, and put a roof over your head. You don't realize it until you get old enough and like, wow, man. I mean, my mom was a single mom, too. So like it really, I started really realizing it when I started working my first jobs and realizing, damn, man, I don't make anything at all doing this. Like and then I started thinking about how much I found out how much she paid for rent every month. And I was like, everything started making sense. And I started paying attention to what she was paying for food when she'd buy groceries. And it's like, man, the minute you start working, you start kind of you're able to put yourself in your parents' shoes a little bit. Mm-hmm. Man, it starts changing everything.
What was your first job?
My first job ever, I worked at a taco shop. That was an internet cafe, and so yeah, it was like a weird internet cafe. You pay by like the minute or whatever.
Was it dial up?
I think so. Yeah.
What year are we talking?
2000 or
Okay,
1999.
so it might have been like an early broadband. Sure.
Actually, it could have been an early broadband. It was right around that time when, like, it was broadband was becoming more of like I had friends that had it in their home, but not everyone. It wasn't
Right.
like everyone had it yet. But yeah, this internet cafe it was a pretty bootleg operation. I feel like there were maybe 5 computers in there or 4 computers only, and it was an old Taco Bell that like shut down, and these people opened. They already had the kitchen, so I guess they were like, well, let's make an internet cafe that has a Mexican kitchen in it. So they started making, like, they had a whole Mexican menu there, and I was a cashier guy there, and I worked with a chick named Pantera, and she had a snake, and she would bring it to work. I don't know how sanitary that is. She would be there with a huge snake around her while
she was working.
While she was working. Oh yeah, the place was like a total mess.
I'm guessing it's not still there.
Oh no way! Actually, so I got my second job after that already lined up, and I had to go in and basically quit on them, and they were like, they kind of got mad at me for not giving them 2 weeks notice, and it was like summertime, and I was like in between high school, grades, just like trying to work, and I quit on them. I didn't care. I was like, man, this place isn't even a good record. Like I wouldn't even want to have them on my resume. This is just such a sketchy, weird place. I knew it too, but were
they dealing drugs out the back or something?
They were laundering money for people in there, and they ended up getting raided by people or by cops and shut down. 2 weeks later, probably would have been on my last day of work. I always joke about that with my buddy George that worked there and got me the job there. He's always like, man, I bet that would have been your shift the day that they got raided. I was like, I should have waited just to have the story, But that was my second job. I got into scuba diving stuff because that was my dad's business. So I started working on boats with him. And
okay, so did you spend half your time with your dad and half your time with your mom?
I spent weekends mostly. Like my dad had me from like Friday through Sunday, and my mom had me the rest of the week. So my mom had me on the weeknights when we were going to school and making sure we do our homework.
Your dad got to be with you during the fun times, and your mom had to like take care of the real shit.
Kind of, yeah. See, my dad's business was scuba diving, and he would run charter trips. So his work was always on the weekends. Like that's actually his busiest days. Like I feel like he had Mondays and Tuesdays off. Then he'd run small dive trips on like Wednesday, like beginners trips or something on Wednesday and Thursdays, and then Friday and Saturdays were like the big charter dive trip days where he would be out multiple times. He'd take like a early trip out, take an afternoon trip out, and sometimes even like an early evening or late afternoon. We started being stuck with him on the boat, and we would be excited when it rained. Usually, we could go home. It got canceled. We'd be like, yes, like me and my brother. We'd be like so excited about it because my brother had gotten a guitar one Christmas, and I had like really cheap little drums, and we were trying to play, and like we were just excited to not have to go on the boat. Plus, when we started getting into like riding our bikes around the neighborhood and getting out of the house and stuff more, and kind of getting away from our parents. And we had friends. That's when we started making friends in the neighborhood. We were living where my dad was living in, so we would always ask him if he could just go out on the boat and leave us with our friends. He'd be like, nope, you get on the boat and you're going to work for me. Once I got old enough, when I had that first job, once I got old enough and started working with him, he started paying me. So I was kind of into the idea of having this kind of cooler job, I was like, I work on boats. It's pretty cool.
That's a pretty cool job. And are you a certified scuba diver and everything?
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I had to get a bunch of certifications. Like at the time, my dad made me get like all of them, So he was pretty serious about diving. That was like, he got into it through the military and was a Navy SEAL and everything. And he before that, he was just a dude from Philly that grew up super poor, never had an opportunity to do anything like that. But he was real smart, real sharp guy. And when he got into the Navy and he started scuba diving, he thought it was like the coolest thing ever. He felt like it was the closest you could be to being an astronaut, like without having to leave the planet,
I mean, the underwater life seems so alien to us. Mm-hmm. Earth dwellers.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, just the feeling of being in it. The deeper you go, the more disconnected you get from what's up. Up at the surface. It's bizarre. It's kind of funny growing up in it. I can't say I like became a master diver. I've done plenty of diving and stuff, but thinking about, I have an older brother from my mom's previous marriage who, when my parents got together, he met my dad and he was like, oh, this guy's the coolest stepdad ever. And he's like, so he took after him and started spearfishing and doing like competitive free diving and stuff like that. And like, he was like way more into that whole lifestyle. Like me and my brother were rockers from the day, like
your younger brother.
Yeah. From the day we heard Appetite for Destruction really was the one for me. Like that record, I heard electric guitar on that, and I was like, "Oh, rock and roll is my life from here on out." I'm a rocker for sure. And the harder and heavier it got, or the more complex, or the weirder it sounded, I was super interested in it, and that changed everything. I all of a sudden became pretty uninterested in like learning to hold my breath for as long as I can underwater. And
not that those two things are mutually exclusive. Like you could be a rock and scuba diver.
Totally. But I mean, at the time, like I remember meeting my first friends my age that were into music also, and like, because I got into it pretty young. I'd say like I was in like really early elementary school when I got my first couple cassette tapes. I was obsessed with them,
So you got Appetite on cassette?
That was my first one, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Steven Adler's been on this show, by the way.
Oh, has he?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that record forever will be like one of my desert island picks. Like it'll just have to go with me wherever I go till I die. It's a classic. But I mean, that's what started it. I had a little boombox and I would listen to these tapes in my room. My parents thought it was funny, and they're like, oh, he likes music so much. He's always listening to tapes, My older brother thought it was cool because he's the one that had music around at the time. He was into rock and stuff. He's the reason like we got into like punk and stuff. He turned me and my brother onto like the Exploited and like heavier stuff. So when we were a little older, like he was just kind of like, oh yeah, you guys are listening to like Metallica and like you've heard of Slayer, like started pushing stuff on us. I don't think we even realized that he was
guiding you in the days before the internet made everything open.
I know. I don't think we realized it at the time, but we didn't take it for granted. It was exciting for me every time he had something to play for us. We didn't know anything as kids, and it became a thing that every birthday he knew we liked music, so he'd just get us cassette tapes. And like sometimes like he would get my brother to and get me to and just guess. Our taste started developing at some point, and we started having opinions on things that we like and don't like. He would come in and bring me like, he brought me one time Alice of Chains, Jar of Flies record, and I was like, why, man? Like, I was trying to find. Actually, and the funny thing is, like, I heard that record somewhere a few years ago, and like there were a couple songs on it that I were like, wow, these are pretty good songs actually. Yeah. But at the time when I was a kid, I was like, oh, this is boring, man. I don't like this at all.
It's too mainstream.
And I was getting into heavy stuff, and that was like and that's like one of their soft records too. Like it's not even very heavy at all. So that, and then he got me AC/DC, For Those About to Rock, We Salute You, which that's still one of my favorites. Awesome record. But like, I remember he got my younger brother Kill 'Em All by Metallica and maybe a Primus tape or something, something. It was like very random, but I remember like that would be a thing. Like sometimes he would get stuff. I'd be like, man, that Metallica Kill 'Em All, like that's the one we both wanted. And we're like, shit. Sometimes
you could just dub it.
It's true. Well, we lived in the same room at the time anyways.
Oh, okay.
So, but still, it was like one of those things like, I started taking his cassette tapes with me places when I got a Walkman, and he'd always be so pissed off about it. And same, but vice versa. Me and my brother grew up real like we shared everything. We lived in a one bedroom together, like with my mom. Like growing up, like when my parents split up and got divorced, my mom hadn't worked. She hadn't worked in a really long time. She was a stay-at-home mom for a long time. So when they split up, she had to start working and figure stuff out. So she was working multiple jobs, and me and my brother were always like staying with our Aunt Betty or my grandmother. People were like watching us all the time. We were in like after-school care programs that we'd wait around for her till late at night. I feel like that during those years, those are the years I really started finding the most music because my mom wasn't around to really police anything that we were like listening to. And especially once I got to like middle school and she was like okay with us being home alone and we could just go home from school and like she would trust me to hang out with my brother and not get ourselves into any trouble. We were good kids though. We didn't really get in trouble, but that was when I started really finding music a lot, because I started finding friends that were getting into underground stuff as well, and they were like starting to find things too. And that's when I started dubbing tapes and trading with people, and I had friends like that, and that changed everything. But like also that was also the time when my mom started actually trying. That's probably when she figured out some of the stuff I was into was like maybe extreme for a kid, especially like metal and stuff. Like she was kind of a strict Hispanic mom, and Catholic and everything. So, certain death metal records and thrash metal shit. And
although, I mean, it's funny because like I was talking to Dave Lombardo about this stuff, and his parents were super Catholic. That's how they got him into the country from Cuba. So they like smuggled them in through the Jesuits. Wow. And he's like, yeah, my parents knew that it was all an act. They were cool. They knew all the guys in the band. So it was theater to a certain extent.
That's amazing. I would love to talk to that dude, man. Like that was like one of my biggest influences. Like when I first heard Slayer, like that was a big game changer for me. It made me want to play fast, for sure. Which is funny. I play pretty slow with Torche. Like,
did your brother give you Rain in Blood or something?
No, I did get Rain in Blood from my. I got it from a friend of mine, this dude David Miller. He was like he was a couple grades ahead of me in school, and when I met him, he's one of the first guys I knew that had real long hair. When I met him, he had Rain in Blood on CD, and I dubbed that thing to a cassette tape and took that home and like played it like crazy. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I bought Divine Intervention, and then I got Hella Waits, I started buying all of them. Like that was like, I became obsessed with Slayer, like when I found that. And then, I found Morbid Angel. Then I found all this other stuff, double bass drumming, all this stuff was crazy. But Dave Lombardo's style for sure, like, was like a huge influence in the early days of like me expanding and learning kind of how to move on the drum kit, man. Hearing all his drum fills, I was like, I want to do that so bad.
Well, it kind of made sense when I talked to him because he grew up listening to Cuban music, which, typically has 4 percussionists, and so his busy style is just basically his interpretation of like a tribe of drummers playing together, a group of drummers.
That's awesome.
And I feel like that's why of all the metal drummers, he has such a great pocket and a great feel. It doesn't feel stiff in any way. It's so perfect.
Yeah, totally.
But so you told me earlier that you and your brother and your mom all lived in a 1-bedroom apartment together. Mm-hmm. How did you get a drum set into the mix?
So our bass player for Torche, current bass player Eric, his family were like a rock and roll family, basically. They were like, when I met Eric and his brothers, he had his younger brother Brian and then his adopted brother Josiah. And they were like, these guys became my best friends. Like when I met them, like they were pretty much like the people I hung out with the most because I felt like I could vibe with these kids more than anybody. They had long hair, metal shirts. I could never grow my hair long or even have metal t-shirts. Really, like, I had a couple that could get away with my mom, but like, my mom was pretty like adamant about me not falling into like a rock and roll, like really, that's what it is.
Did you go to church when you were a kid?
As a kid, yeah, and then
you were baptized and confirmed and all of that.
I was never confirmed. I had my I was baptized. Oh no, baptized, and then I had my first communion, and then I never got confirmed when I was going to like Sunday classes to like get ready for my confirmation. I just started skipping. Mm-hmm. Actually, I had one of my good friends, Joel, whose mom used to take us to like punk concerts, turn me on to the Melvins and Helmet and that whole world. Like his mom was cool. His mom was like the younger, cool mom. She would take us and all of our friends to concerts, and like our parents would actually allow it because they loved her and thought she was cool and responsible. She was a single mom too, really tough, and so everyone was like, okay, so she would take the kids on like field trips to see shows.
So like, she took you to see Melvins.
She didn't take me to see them, but she had when I met her for the first time, she had just seen Melvins and didn't know who they were. She saw them with Helmet, and I think she got into Helmet through seeing them with Danzig because she was like a huge Misfits and Danzig fan. But so she had all these CDs, and a lot of them were like she would see opening bands on these tours and just buy their CDs, and like she had them all at the house, and like she was just, when I first met her, she was just like, oh yeah, the Melvins, talking about the Melvins. She had just seen them at the time. I was really young at the time. It was around the time Stoner Witch came out, so yeah, she had that on CD, and I asked her if it was okay if I brought cassettes over and recorded, and I came in and recorded everything that she had there. So that's what we would do. I'd have a sleepover on the weekend with my friend. We would skateboard around this neighborhood and stuff, and then like at night when we couldn't go out anymore, when parents were like, all right, it's lockdown time, you're hanging out here in the house, I'd be like, it's time to dub all these cassettes. So we would sit there and we'd just record everything, and I'd go home with like 4 or 5 tapes, with tons of stuff.
Coolest mom ever.
Oh, she was awesome, And that's like a whole story. That's like another side story that could go into, like, cause my best friend that I grew up with, Joel, he passed away when we were in high school, and his mom disappeared. Went on a mission to find her for years.
This is the woman that you were just talking about?
Yeah.
She disappeared.
Yeah, she wrote us a letter to our family because she knew how close we all were, and she was just like, I want to let you know that this happened. They had moved away for like a year, so we didn't hear from them.
So you didn't know that your friend had passed away?
No, we found out kind of after the fact, and like she was just like, I had to get away, and like, whatever. She disappeared on us for years, and when I started playing in bands years later, I never stopped thinking about her though. She was such like a big reason I do this, I guess, in some ways, or especially like my style of playing now. Like I feel like if she would to see me play with Torche, she of all people would probably like get why I'm doing what I'm doing, and it'd just be. I always thought it would be cool to like let her know, like, and so I went on this mission to find her. I actually started like searching the internet like for this woman, and I found out her actual name because I only knew her as Angie, which I knew couldn't have been her real name. So I started doing a bunch of research. I started looking my friend up, and I found his obituary. I found like a bunch of like surviving family members, and she was nowhere to be found on the internet, but I actually wrote messages on Facebook to like a bunch of people with the names of his family, and like knowing some of them probably wouldn't be it, and a bunch of people were like, no, it's not the right guy, and eventually found a woman who was her cousin, and I told her the whole story, like, and she was just like, oh, I'm gonna get you in touch with her, so she got me in touch with her, and we were reunited like maybe like 15 years later, after not seeing each other. Got to hang out and stuff, and like it's kind of crazy. Like she's dating a guy who's like a local jazz musician, like jazz drummer actually. He's just like a local dude and plays with like local people, and he's like an instructor. He's a really cool guy. It was like just kind of weird, but I got to go hang out with her and see her with my mom. It was cool, and she's kind of blown away like that Torche is a band. That's what I chose to do, How are you ever to know like you're going to influence somebody when they're young like that, I think why kids are like kind of important to me. I feel like I didn't really know I was good with kids until kind of recently.
Do you have kids?
I don't, but my girlfriend's got 2 kids. So when I stay over there, it's kind of a cool thing for me to be around the kids and realize that like they value things I say, they listen to me, or they think that they think I'm cool, so they want to hear what I have to say about things, or they kind of they have a certain respect for me. The son's 12 years old, and I'm taking to his first concerts recently.
Oh, what did you take him to?
Took him to see Tool. That was his first one because he's a big Tool fan. He actually he grew up on Tool. Like his mom plays Tool a lot. So
wow.
So he grew up on Tool. He's a super smart kid. Like he's probably going to be taking college classes right by the time he finishes middle school. Like he's like a very unusual kid. I think he's got like tons of potential. He plays piano and violin, interested in being an engineer, loves cars, and will talk your ear off about engines and things. Like, he's really cool. But yeah, he loves Tool. That's one of his favorites. So I took him to see Tool.
Oh man! So here's what you got to do if you want to impress him even more: is you can have him listen to Danny's episode of this show from 2 weeks ago, and then have him listen to yours and be like, "Yo, check it out."
I know. What actually happened was like I actually know Danny and his wife Ryan.
Oh, cool.
They actually hooked us up with the tickets.
Oh, nice. So then you took him back.
So I took him backstage, and he got to meet everybody. And man, they treated him so good. They brought him a couple T-shirts, gave him a set list, like hooked him up. So me and his mom were like, damn, he has no idea how good he's got it. This is like his first rock concert experience.
He's like, this is what it's like to go to a rock concert.
Yeah, it was cool though. I mean, I saw you had Danny on the show. That's awesome. Like, he's great.
He's an intense dude.
Yeah, he's awesome. We were having awesome conversations about Judas Priest and Meshuggah when I last saw him, and I had to be dragged out of the backstage by my girlfriend. She was just like, all right, well, we were also drinking his tequila.
Yeah.
And we got I was pretty banged up, and I was just running my mouth, and she had to grab me and drag me out of there.
I made a rule that if someone offers me a drink while I do this show, like if a guest wants to drink with me, then I'll do it, because it always helps us kind of get to a deeper place, or whatever. It makes them feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
So
what are we drinking?
Vodka at first. No, I was drinking whiskey and he was drinking vodka. Mm-hmm. But he was drinking a lot of vodka. He's got a very big appetite, and he's a very big person. So
yeah.
Kind of scary.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was at their place for like 5 hours. Like, Justin showed up, and then we all jammed for a while. And then I walked out into the broad daylight at 5 o'clock on a Monday, and I'm like, what the fuck just happened?
That's amazing.
But when you're in Tool, I guess you can live life like a rock star every day.
Yeah, right? Man, it's got to be the life. I guess that was the dream when I was a kid.
I feel like they manifested that, and now they're like 58 years old, and they're still doing it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, there you go.
That's crazy. Good for them, though, man. Like, it's a lot harder these days to do that. It's near impossible.
They got in at the right time.
Yeah, it's true. It's all about the time. We always talk about that. Like, people say it's a lot about Torche. They're always like, oh, had these guys come out in the 90s, like, they would have been, huge or whatever. But, unfortunately, they're current now. And, there's only so much. I mean, guitar rock, I have a thing. Like, I think guitar rock's dead. It's a controversial opinion. People get pissed off about it sometimes when I say that. Like, it's not dead. It's like, if you compare it up against what guitar rock was commercially, like, to the average consumer, 15 years ago, and then 15 years before that, and 15 years before that, it's like it ain't shit now, kind of, unfortunately. Like,
well, things always go in cycles.
They do, yeah.
I don't know that it's possible for someone to shock the world with an electric guitar in the way that has been done in the past. I mean, It's kind of like it's now about kind of recontextualizing things that have already been done in new ways or something like that.
Yeah.
But who knows? You never know.
You never know. I mean, there's always going to be people being innovative. I believe that. You know, I don't think like it ends here, because I don't think it's dead as like a creative outlet for people. Yeah, I think it could still continue to like grow and be innovative, but it's just a lot less people interested in doing it, and also like less people interested in it as an art form. I mean,
although I will say Tool's probably going to go number one.
I think they did.
Yeah,
I saw that they did.
And you guys are still touring, and people come to see you play and have a great time. So it's not dead. I mean, you have a devoted fan base, and you're able to do it.
It's true. And I don't take that for granted at all, But I mean, I feel for like some bands I'm friends with who I think are like some of the best bands, and I'm like seeing them touring circles that just doesn't catch on. It's really hard to gauge what people are really into or what people value. You're like, in that kind of
impossible.
Stuff. It's like it really is,
Unless you're like Rick Rubin or something, and then some people like know how to tell.
Yeah.
Or their taste is just aligned with popular taste in some weird way.
It's true. And I think I'm just attracted to weird stuff. That's probably what it is. Like, I don't know, but I like the thought that like we growing up in the 90s and really digesting all my like formative music in the 90s, There was so much diversity even within like scenes and little pockets of music. Like, I mean, just even like the whole grunge explosion, all the big bands sounded totally different from each other, you know? Like Nirvana and Soundgarden sound completely different from each other, but are still somehow regarded as like the same.
Well, they were marketed with the same catchphrase, but and they were from the same city.
Yeah, totally.
But other than that, I mean, it's kind of like they have nothing more in common with one another than you do with some other random band from Florida, you know?
For sure, yeah. I guess what I was trying to get at would be like maybe I think things also now are like there's a lot of people just doing like a very genre specific thing, you know? Like what we play with like stoner rock bands all the time. Like the typical opener for us, you know, is like a band that sounds like Sleep or something, you know? And it's like pretty typical when you get to the venue and like it's a lot of amps and like slow, heavy, weed related name. You know, we get a lot of that. Like, and
it's interesting. I wonder if the fact that lots of people listen to music through streaming services and those streaming services have a way of like putting everything together with this algorithm and classifying everything in these discrete genres, like even more than radio ever did. I wonder if that's why things feel more homogenous to you.
Yeah, maybe. I guess like taste.
It's not like there isn't diversity in music. There probably is just as much or even more than ever before.
For sure.
It seems like although you can consume anything as a listener, things are marketed in a more tightly packaged way than ever before.
For sure. Well, you know, it's funny you mentioned, like streaming services for sure. Like like someone gets into one band and can find a whole group of bands that are similar in an hour's time, you know, and be like, this is what I'm into right now. Like, this sound.
It's less of a slow journey. You have less time to digest it than, say, you did when you had to tape your friend's mother's CDs and then bring them home and kind of parse it out and listen to it and figure it out. Like now you can just keep moving for better or worse. I mean, there's probably something good about that too.
Yeah. I mean, I know. I always think about that weird, like, double-edged sword that technology can be with situations like that, especially with creativity. Because I think sometimes, like, I actually own a screen printing shop with my brother in Miami, and we print like all the young local band stuff. We're friends with all of them. Go see their shows and hang out. Try to be like keep up with them all, you know, and see what they're up to and see what they're doing. And I feel like some of them are good and have potential and can play pretty well, but there's just, and some of them aren't even that young anymore. And some of them, this is like their third or fourth band they've started over a period of time, and like. One thing I noticed is that like one band falls apart and the next band starts and they're like, this is our band that we're doing that's kind of like this band, you know, now like we're doing something more inspired by this, and then you hear it and it's very obvious, you know. And what I think the biggest thing I notice about the younger bands, I mean, this isn't, I'm not completely generalizing all across the board. Like there's definitely like young kids as well, especially in South Florida. There's a couple that are like unusually creative or different. There's something different about what they do, but like the general population of young people I know playing music down there, like it's kind of funny. They're all really young and they have like a very nostalgic thing for like old music, but they've digested so much of it so quick that I think that they kind of missed the point, almost what they're trying to do, or they lack that attention to detail that made some of those bands special, you know? So like it just becomes like a generic, watered down version of something that happened in like the 80s or 90s, and is like just being made again for young kids to be able to enjoy, like younger people to be able to enjoy.
But now
it.
you just sound like an old man.
I know I sound like an old man, but you know, but the thing is like I also like there's also young people who create stuff that's like, you know, interesting and different, you know, as well. I mean, I'm not saying like everything, but I think like that's the problem with that's the only problem with the technology, is that sometimes kids might get into something and dive so deep into it and they digest so much. And like, I mean, I'm even guilty of it. And I think that's why I'm bringing it up. It's like, I notice that if I'll just go on these like download sessions with my Apple Music thing at night before bed, once in a while, downloading like jazz records, like reading about stuff and downloading a ton of jazz records I'm reading about. But to sit and digest them for real, it's going to take a lot of time. And like, how well am I really going to ever get to know these records when I'm already reading about another 10 records that I should be listening to? Like, you know, I mean, it just becomes a lot, you know?
I think it's also probably easier to be derivative now than ever before. In the past, you would try to rip somebody off and mistakenly fall into your own style because you couldn't remember seeing exactly what that person was doing.
Yeah.
Now you can see exactly what that person is doing and you can totally replicate it. You can slow it down. You can access video footage of anybody. And so it's easier to kind of ape somebody else's style than it's ever been before.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, but people said that when records came out, too.
They're
true. Like, now somebody can steal my style. Before that, everybody had their own style because everybody was just playing live. And that's probably true. Mm-hmm. You know, and people's memory was probably better before books came out, you know, before the printing press was developed. Monks had to memorize libraries worth of information. It's like the human mind gets stretched further when there's fewer resources to lean on, but which is why it's so interesting that the human mind seeks to create these resources to make it easier on itself, you know?
Yeah.
Tell me about how Torche got started.
Well, I was actually trying out for Floor, which was Steve's previous band.
Right.
I got a phone call from the guy who put our first record out, Andy Lowe, ran a label called Robotic Empire. They did the first Torche album, and he was a friend of mine. I met him at an ISIS show in 2002. Was it ISIS? No. He was with somebody else, but we talked about ISIS or Neurosis, and I met the guy, and we became friends, and he thought a band that I was playing at the time, like my high school band, that were pretty good for kids, and kind of like, you know, we just talking about music. I ended up getting his contact info, and we stayed in touch. Then he would always ask me about Floor. He's like, dude, what's up with Floor? You know those guys? I'm like, nah, those guys are old, man. They were older than me. They were like at least 10 years older than me, all of them. So I was just like, yeah, dude, I don't know any of those guys, but I love that band. You know, they don't play often. They're kind of an elusive, weird band around here. One day he called me and was like, you still live in Florida, right? In Miami? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, Floor needs a drummer. Like, you should try out. And so I was totally into the idea, but I was about to start college, actually. So I was like, damn, it's like the timing couldn't have been worse for me in a way, you know? And, you know, I was like, well, I'm not going to say no to it. I'm just going to like say yes and see what happens. And tried out. Steve liked how I played and like was just like, yeah, you got the gig. You know, like if you're down to keep jamming. And then the bass player playing with us, him and Steve had some differences and he took off. And then Steve was like, man, I'm like the last guy doing Floor here on my own. Like, I think I should just change the name. Kind of approached us about it and told us he wants to change the name and like have a new fresh start, be able to do more with his sound, you know, than what Floor. He didn't want to feel like pigeonholed by like what people expect from Floor, I guess. So he ended up changing the name to Torche. And at first I was kind of bummed about it because Floor was a band I listened to so much. I was pretty stoked to play with them. They had a cool history, but it is the best thing he could have done, just to change the name, because we are a totally different band. We're more diverse and we can do a lot more. And had we been Floor, I think Floor fans would have been upset at us changing the style and the sound, you know? But where like Floor fans can accept that Torche is a different band and actually listen to us and enjoy it, knowing it's not this classic band that just like changed their sound on them. You know, I don't know why it even makes a difference, but it really does. Like, people are like that, you know? And when the bass player left, I got Jonathan in the fold. I was like, he was like a friend of mine from high school. Our bands used to play together, and I was just like, this dude could play with us, and he records bands too, and he's got gear, and he's reliable, and he joined the band. I was 19 at the time when I joined. John must have been like 20 or 21. John was 21. I was 19. Steve was 30, and Juan was 33. And Yeah, that's how it started. I just started jamming with them at first. I didn't really know how serious it was going to get at the time. Like, Steve would talk about it being serious. He'd be like, yeah, like, we're going to go to Japan eventually. We're going to do this. We're going to have a record come out, and we're going to tour. And I was like, all right, like, I mean, if this all happens, like, I'll be here for it, I guess, but I'll figure my life out. And
did you go to college too?
I did a year. So, like, when I met him, it was a summer of 2004. And I did a full year. Our record came out April 2005, the first one. Right after the record came out and I finished some classes, we hit the road immediately. And then I never really went back to school. I tried to go back to school twice. Both times it just didn't work. Like, my attention span wasn't there for it anymore. And I was like already in the weird tour mode where being on tour started feeling pretty normal for me. We were touring a lot, and I think, like, I tried to go back to school after we had already been touring for like 4 years pretty regularly, and it was super hard to go back to school. I mean, I finished my classes, but I just knew I wasn't going to go take any more after. I was like, yeah, it's going to be really hard managing school and the band. I had to kind of make the decision to do one or the other. And at one point in time, I was weighing it. I mean, because Torche didn't make money for so long. We were coming out of pocket for like well into the second record, like, which is like good for like 4-year period of time, I think. We were just like, this is one of these things, like, my family were looking at me like, what are you doing? Like, you have nothing. Like, you don't have any money. You're coming back, trying to get a job constantly. And I mean, I get it. Like, I can only imagine being a parent and, like, you see your kids like 23, 24, and it's like everyone else is like, all his friends are at school or doing things, and I'm like, making no money with a band. My mom actually never saw me even physically play the drums at the time. Like, she had never seen me sit on a drum set and play the drums. It was like a total myth that I was even a drummer. Like,
has she seen you play now?
Yeah, it took her about 5 years into Torche's career before she like accepted it. She actually sent her boyfriend to a Torche show to talk to me, to like have a talk with me about
like an
my
intervention about your future.
About my future, yeah. And he showed up at the show and saw us play, and he came up to me after and was like, I came here because your mom told me to come have a talk with you, and like, I can't believe what I saw. Like, I can't say shit. Like, you guys are loud and like powerful. Wow, like, I'm blown away. Like, you're a real band. I'm blown away. You're a real band. And I'm like, yeah. We've been doing this for years now. We've toured all over the place.
What did your dad, the Navy SEAL, think?
He only got to see us play one time, and he thought it was cool. My dad was supportive of it, though. My dad liked to travel, and he traveled doing scuba trips all over the world. And yeah, he was an adventurer, so he thought it was cool. He was just like, oh, yeah, like, go for it. Always, that was always his thing. Like, oh, you got a tour lined up? Like, it was never a question about money with him. Like, he was never like, how much are you going to make? That was like my mom's department. My mom's like, are you making money? I'm like, fuck. My dad would be like, where are you going? Like, right. Oh, damn, you're going there? Awesome. Like, yeah, right. He was all about that. So he supported it. My uncle, who I was real close with, my dad's brother, he bought me my first drum kit. My Uncle Dave, he was important. He was the one that was like, yeah, your mom won't let you have this drum kit in the apartment, obviously, so like, you have a place to put this, because if you do, I'm gonna buy you a drum set. I was like, oh man. So he got me a Thomas Starr Classic. That was my first one.
Great.
Yeah, birch
it's a nice
shells.
Kit.
Yeah.
Do you feel like a success?
Sure. Yeah. Why not? I definitely feel like I've achieved a lot, like that. And I feel like I put together some things I'm super proud of. So for sure, like, I would say it's my career with Torche has been a success so far. I mean, if it was to end right now, I would say it was a successful run.
Do you feel like it's been a creatively fulfilling role for you in the band?
For sure, yeah, definitely. And it's been a growing experience as a drummer constantly with them, because I'm actually just like I'm kind of a fast, ahead of the beat drummer naturally. And Steve's always pushed me through the years to slow down and play a little different. And I feel like only now, actually, the last couple years, I feel like I've really fallen into feeling it for real. Like I could play slow for real. I'm not like fighting myself to play slow.
Not thinking.
I'm not thinking. Yeah, I'm not thinking. And now I'm just feeling it. It's different. Something changed in the last couple of years for me, especially recording on the last album. I really like was in a certain zone. It's been because of him, really, like a lot of his influence. Like Steve as a songwriter and as a guitar player, like he has like a feel to his guitar playing and needs to be played to a certain way for sure. And like it's been just me figuring that out. You know, he's always super. I mean, he writes sometimes around beats. Like he'll be like, Rick, you got a cool beat, you know, like play it. And I'll write to it. And like
That's rare.
Yeah, it's super rare. But like sometimes he's just not inspired, and he'll hear a beat and be like, just get it. Like Steve's really good with that, man. I feel like it's been very like creatively fulfilling working with someone like him. And the other two guys I've got in the band with me too, John and Eric, I mean, all of them on the last record wrote music for it and came with like fully realized ideas. Like,
did you?
Not me. I didn't come with anything like that, but me and Steve put a couple songs together, just the two of us, which historically Torche actually, a lot of stuff came together that way. A lot of it was me and Steve jamming like in a room and like coming with like skeletons of songs, like fully kind of put together. And usually the other members would like add on, but it really changes. And this record's the most different of them all. Cause like Eric, the bass player, is an amazing drummer. He's like a crazy good drummer. Like he was an influence on me. I was like, before I even played drums, like he was already in bands when we were in middle school that were like opening for Cannibal Corpse and like big metal shows. And like he was the drummer in the band and he was insanely good. I used to go see them. I was the roadie. I was the merch kid. I would go and just sell their merch, t-shirts and hang out, you know? But Eric's insanely good. But Eric would come with fully realized programmed ideas. Like two of the songs on the record, he had fully written, and three songs were fully programmed on GarageBand, like drum fills, two guitar parts, bass, everything. And like we heard them and we're just like, this is crazy. It's like a weird MIDI Torche song. Like, but
so then when you hear something like that, how do you make it feel like it belongs to you? Like, how do you play it like it's your own?
Well, it's funny because me and Eric have written songs like that in the past, actually, together. Me and him were in another band called House of Lightning with the drummer Floor, and that stuff was put together with, those songs are long. They're like, some of them are 8 to 10 minutes long. They're very proggy, maybe. They're weird. Proggy's not the right word for it. It doesn't sound like prog music. It's just busy. There's a lot of changes. But this dude has these fully realized riffs and ideas. He puts them to a click and sends them to Eric. And Eric sits there and has this 8-minute fully realized song that just sounds like random riffs almost at first. But Eric finds the repetitions in these really long riffs. Then he'll program drums because it's with the click. And he'll program drums. And then he'll program bass. And then I'll go to his house and we'll listen back to it. And we'll just play with stuff. And I'll tell him like, certain things sound too metal and I wanted to sound more like reggae or something. He'll like move things around and change the beats and I'm like, that's it. And then he'll burn me CDs of it. Then I'd learn this stuff. And then Henry would just come down and like he wouldn't even guide us on like how he wants the rhythm section to feel. He would just show up and be like, we'd count in and start playing a song and he'd be hearing like a whole rhythm section to this orchestrated to this 8-minute song that he has no idea. And like we would throw stops and starts together with him and I while the riff keeps going. And he would just be like, man, you guys are crazy. But really it's Eric, you know, Eric's just like really good at putting that stuff together. He hears everything he can pick out the song and everything like immediately. Like he knows like where the riffs get hooky and catchy. He knows how to like, he's just a really great songwriter. Actually, he's pretty amazing. Like I'd say he's a huge asset to the band. I think like his contributions to the album are pretty stellar and also different for us and more challenging. He has some challenging riffs that like, and like challenging little parts for these guys, which I also like a lot. Like people bring stuff to the table where it's everyone's got to work a little bit to really get this down. It makes it feel like we're armed when we're out there. We're like, man, I got some serious ammo out here. Cause like, it's like, you know, tricky stuff. And, you know, when we execute it well, it's like we were getting a little lazy almost with the last lineup because everyone's kind of like, You can get in this weird groove of like playing video games while a couple guys are like arguing over a riff and everyone's kind of giving up slowly, and I'll come back in 10 minutes when you guys are ready to work, and just getting like that.
So now you're more engaged again. You're more in it together.
Well, it is. Everyone's like working on their own more now. Like before, no one would work on their own. I don't know what it was with our dynamic as a band at the time, but like no one was working. Like it's like no one was working on their own time or like trying to come up with ideas. Like we would all get together, fly in, and like be in the same room and just hope that jamming together would bring stuff out. And it would always. Like anytime we were all in a room together and throwing riffs at each other, like it would trigger stuff and people would be like, hear things, and it happens. But it was just like, it became work to do that. And it was also like impossible to get anyone to write on their own. John would have riffs he'd record since he has a studio. He'd sit there and record riffs direct in once in a while when he's playing guitar, but it was very rare at the time. This new record though, Eric came with fully realized songs. I think that like everyone seeing that, like, damn, this new guy just came. He actually came with like 14 songs written, like more than a whole album. Was like, any of the stuff that you guys like, we can use. And we liked a bunch of it. And it was just impressive. And we were all just like, I knew that that's what I was bringing to the table, having Eric in the fold, though. I was like, we all knew that, actually. He's filled in on drums for me for like a full tour when I couldn't go on a tour once. And he on no notice. I mean, he also played drums for Corrosion of Conformity on like 7 days notice. Went to Australia with them, like showed up playing 20 songs, like, and they called me and were like, dude, this guy's insane. I'm like, yeah, he's just he can play everything, he's good. But yeah, having him in the fold, I think everyone was like, I need to step up now. Like, we got this dude's like writing a ton of stuff. So John had a bunch of ideas that he started recording, just riffs. Like he's not as like technically savvy to do like programmed out intricate stuff like Eric does. Like Eric's songs, they're hilarious because I'll just keep a lot of the fills. I think the fills he comes up with are great. I'm just like, man, like that's awesome. I'm just gonna learn it just like that because it's just perfect, And but John's would be very primitive. They would just be like a simple like drum beat off of like a Casio keyboard, like this repetitive weird beat, and like him just playing riffs. And some of the riffs were great. We're like, man, we'll use that too. And like their styles are totally different, I think, because of that as well. Eric will like chop things up and make things real intricate, where John will write on like a 4/4 always. Like he's like a lot of like very straightforward stuff, But and then Steve's better in a room with everyone. Like he'll come up with one really good riff and just show us in the room and have to work on it like with people. Like I think he feeds off of other people's energy. Like he doesn't, like, at least when he's been working with us, he doesn't always come with like fully realized songs. But Eric is wild. He just comes and he's like, I've got all these different parts, and this song's pretty much done. Like we hear it and we know it's done. It's crazy how you just know. You're like, it ends and you're like, yeah, I mean, it had everything. Like you killed it on that. And like he's just crazy.
Do you have any creative ambitions outside of the band that you want to explore someday?
I kind of already do a bunch of stuff. Like I designed like flyers and gig posters in South Florida.
And you have a screen printing business.
And I have a screen printing business as well. So I do all that stuff. I was I was going to school for graphic design. So like that's something that through the years I've used with Torche a lot and for Floor as well. I did a lot of stuff for them. Designed a lot of local bands, releases and things like that. A lot of t-shirts. And so I do that. That's like something I do for fun. But musically, I play with other bands too. And I played with a lot of bands like outside of Torche through the years, but not heavy touring or anything.
But I'm saying, like, is there anything that you haven't tried that you wanted
that I want to? Oh, okay.
That you're like scared to try, but you kind of want to try?
Totally. Actually, I want to get into video next. Kind of. Me and John put together the Torche music video for the record on 24 hours notice, like on a 24-hour like time frame for the label. We turned down a video they paid for. Like it wasn't working for the band, and they were pretty upset about it. So John and I filmed a bunch of footage on our iPhones and made a video with using DaVinci. And my friend recommended. He's like, it's a free program. Me and John watched a tutorial for like 45 minutes, and then we just started editing our footage together. I was like, well, we'll figure it out. We edited it together, and my girlfriend works in film and advertising and stuff like that, and she's a super creative person and also has taste. I definitely judge, like I I'd say her judgment on a lot of stuff is pretty spot on with mine. But yeah, she saw the video and was blown away. She's like, "You guys have never edited a video before." But I actually got a couple gigs editing, people hitting me up to edit their videos and put videos together for them now from that. So I kind of like thought about maybe investing in some cameras and a few things, and just doing it for fun, like at first, and see what happens with it. But like, I actually really enjoyed doing it. It's just like you said, it's scary to get into. I would
That's cool.
I would also really love to do I'd also really love to have a record label, but it's such a hard. Ugh. It's such a hard thing. I mean, I love the idea of like curating, records and things, but it's.
You can make videos for the artists on your label.
Yeah, totally. I know, but then it'll be so much. Maybe so much work. That's the thing. If I had to choose one thing, I'd actually love to go back to school and become a meteorologist.
Well, that's a good place to end it. Rick, thanks so much for doing the show.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
I'll see you on the Weather Channel in 20 years.
I know, right? I hope so.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.